I want to tell the story of my first year of school. I went to a small school called Frankton Grade School, which was maybe about a mile from our house. And there were 8 grades in 3 classrooms. The first, second, and third grade was the classroom that I started out in. And my classmates were largely refugees from the Dust Bowl who'd come to Oregon with nothing. Their parents got jobs in the orchard, thinning fruit and picking fruit, and then they gradually worked up to getting jobs in the cannery and moved up from there. But they were a very simple folk. The story was that Billy Bible, one of my first grade classmates, had gotten his first pair of shoes to go to school. I don't know if that's true, but I know that I had my first experience with sacrificing for somebody who was poor when we found a baby mink one day out behind the school, huddling up against the foundation of the school, and the teachers called the fox farm that also had mink that was nearby, and they came and captured the little mink, and there was a $5 reward, and they gave it to Billy Bible, even though I think I saw it first, and everybody says, well, Billy needs the money more than you do, Jan, and I was okay with that, but I noticed it. But these kids, their English was atrocious because their parents were very unlearned. They said things like, I seen it when I seen it, and all kinds of glaring grammar errors because of what they'd heard at home. And they didn't have a lot of background in book learning. And some of them found it very difficult to start learning to read. I remember Doug Lay in particular, when we were trying to learn Jane and Spot, or whatever the name of that little book was. After a while, struggling over it day after day, I got it memorized, so I wasn't reading it. I was just, see Spot, run. And finally, when I had the mumps and the measles or something, was out of school for a week, and then we came back, the teacher said, we've got a surprise for you. And I'm, oh, wonderful, I wonder what it is. Is it some cookies or what? But it was that Doug Lay had learned to say, see Spot, run. And one little girl, Donnie Long, wasn't potty trained yet. And after about a week of her peeing in her chair at her desk and it running onto the floor, they took her out of school, and she came back the next year. By then, she was potty trained. But these were sweet young people, and I didn't feel I was any better than they were or anything, but I noticed that they were coming from very simple starting. But our teacher loved all her students and was dedicated to teaching everybody. Nobody was going to move forward until the slowest one did, which over the years did come to frustrate me because I wasn't learning anything except hearing repeated attempts to get some of the slower ones to learn. And being 3 grades in one classroom, by the time you'd been there a couple of years, you were hearing the same things that the kids that were a year ahead of you, when you heard their lessons the year before you moved up to that year, and you practically knew those by heart by the time you got there. But I enjoyed it. My first grade teacher, Lulu Bunnell, loved poetry, and she loved phonetics, and she loved to teach us how to sound it out. And then she loved to teach us how to memorize poems and recite them in unison. and we would stand in a row with her demonstrating how to do it, and we would move our arms and the Raggedy Man, he works for Paul. He's the goodest man you ever saw. He comes to our house every day and waters the horses and feeds the hay. And oh, Elizabeth Ann and I just laugh when he drives out the little wobbly calf. Ain't that a nice Raggedy Man? Raggedy, raggedy, raggedy man. I was in town, they asked me, what are you going to be when you grow up? A businessman? I heard lawyer. A lawyer like your dad? I would say, no, I just want to be a raggedy man. Raggedy, raggedy, raggedy man. Mrs. Bunnell's husband, C.O. Bunnell, had written a book called The Legends of the Columbia Gorge, I think it was. And he'd gone out and talked with the Indians in that area and had written down their legends. And one of them was, I remember, an explanation of how the Bridge of the Gods at Cascade Locks had been formed. There's a steel bridge there now, but apparently, according to Indian legend, there used to be a stone bridge there. And it was built by Mount Adams and Mount Hood, who were Indian princes, fighting over Mount St. Helens, a princess. And they hurled rocks at each other until they formed a bridge. Well, I used to be frustrated as a large, for my age, boy who didn't have a big brother or neighbors to wrestle and bang around with. When I'd go out on the schoolyard for recess, some of the older boys would pick on me and knock me around, and I'd come in and cry and complain to my first grade teacher. And she always told me, well, Jan, you're going to have to make your way with those boys, and she'd send me back out after a hug. Well, one fine day, my parents came and said, Mrs. Bunnell's husband has died. She's at home and she's calling for you. And they took me up to her house, and we went in, and she was there in the living room sitting on the couch crying, and she reached out her arms and got me to climb into her lap, and she embraced me and rocked back and forth crying. And I felt her hot tears running down my cheeks, and I felt I can help somebody. I can nurture somebody. And she was nurturing me, nurturing her. And I felt so honored. And I think that had a big impact on the way I saw the world and people. My first grade teacher, Lulu Bunnell. I love my memory of her and all her kindness and her love of poetry and reciting poetry.